Rights advocacy in Nigeria plays an important role in drawing attention to everyday issues that affect citizens, from safety and justice to fair treatment. It helps highlight where support is needed and encourages authorities to respond more effectively. Although progress has been made, challenges remain in areas like expression, policing, and protection of vulnerable groups. Addressing these gaps can strengthen trust between the public and institutions. Identifying clear human rights recommendations is significant because it guides practical steps for improvement. Better oversight, stronger legal protections, and more awareness can gradually create a safer and more inclusive environment for Nigerians. Joining us from our Abuja studio to discuss more on this is Executive Director, Africa Network for Environment, Economic Justice, David Ogola. Thank you so much for joining us on TVC Breakfast. Oftentimes, we bandy the word human rights, up and down when people, gather themselves to say they want to protest, they want to go on, a protest, to stage a protest against some things that they are discontent about, and you find a superior force, maybe from the police, from the army, etc., waging war against the protesters as against the fundamental right from the Constitution. By starting off with this conversation, how much do you think we recognize the importance of human rights for citizens to to stage advocacy for their own cause?
Again, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this program this morning. As you know, no country will survive without respecting the human right of their citizens. And so Nigeria is not an exception. And that's why we consider every development to reflect the human right value. In that, you are protecting not just the citizens, you also providing a safeguard for the survival of such country. Countries where human rights are not respected, where citizens' rights are not respected, you again will see them in the low ladder of development. And so every time organizations like the United Nations Human Rights Committee try to do some assessment of its members in compliance to the agreed human rights in the country. So if you looked at the assessment carried out for Nigeria in 2023, the key observation of the United Nations Human Rights Committee, the key observation revolves around three key issues. One, maternal mortality, which talks about the reproductive rights and the issue of termination of pregnancy. And then the second issue was on intercommunal and interethnic violence. And the last one there was conflict with Boko Haram and civilian protection. If you look at these three key issues that was observed, the issue of human rights run across them. If you take, for example, the issue of mortality, maternal mortality, you will agree with me that the observation of Nigeria, again, if you look at the grading system, Nigeria is really not doing very well. And then if you look at the other second issue, intercommunal ethnic violence, you found that it's interconnected with the third issue, which I also mentioned earlier, the issue with conflict of Boko Haram, which you have seen that even the United States government has now released a report on Nigeria as a country of particular concern. All as a result of concerns around the issue of human rights. And this potentially affects the perception about the country. It also creates legitimacy question on governance. And without proper governance within the state, the issue of human rights will be ignored. And that's why the issue of human rights, the interlinkage with governance, development, cannot be overstated. So there is a direct correlation with the fact that if human rights is not respected, the country will face challenge. Thank you.
Indeed, Mr. Ugola, thank you so much. Now, it's very easy to have these conversations and use data and numbers to have these conversations, but at the heart of every human rights policy or statistic is a person, a human being that is deserving of respect, is deserving of freedom and, basic care. My question is this, what human rights story, based on your experience in the industry, has really stayed with you personally? And what does this story tell us about the sorts of human rights reforms that Nigeria needs right now?
From my experience as a human rights activist in the country, I will say that there are quite huge challenge performing this responsibility, trying to hold some questions around some key issues that threatens human rights. For instance, the issue of corruption. Just take issue of illicit financial flow. The amount of resources that is going out of the country is huge. And you answer, what has that got to do with human rights? The resources that are supposed to be going for education, going for infrastructures, going for health, are leaving the country as a result of illegal activity. And that affects the human right that the people enjoy. And when questions are raised around these, and somehow concerns governments don't take it very easy, and then advocate for these human right and socio-economic right of the people are seen as a threat, and these fundamentally shape the conversation in the country. And that's why it's always very important for country to recognize the need to create a safeguard for their human right protection. And so my experience on this is that politically exposed persons that are involved in massive kleptocracy in the country, looting government resources, taxpayers' money, not only deny the fundamental human right of the people, but they create an environment where it is difficult to achieve development and prosperity for the people. And that's why I think there is a close correlation between abuse of human rights in the country and massive kleptocracy, stealing of public funds, and undermining the right of people who try to advocate for taking that safeguard into consideration in governance.
Mr. Ogolo, thank you so much. But my question was, what human rights story has stayed with you personally? I want you to tell me a story and bring a human face to this conversation.
Well, take for example, the human rights story that have stayed with me, for instance, when you looked at those civilians, particularly in the northern part of the country, whose human rights has been abused as a result of the activity of Boko Haram, the National Security Agency has not only failed to provide civilian protection, so their human rights has been affected, and because the most important objective of governance is to protect and provide the human rights of the people. But in situation of conflict, like the case of Boko Haram and the intercommunal and interethnic violence associated with herdsmen and farmers, the human right of the people is abused. That is a classical case of human right abuse. That's and right. Then you talk about poverty. Poverty as a result of lack of resources, lack of job. You talk about economic and socio-economic right of the people. That, as a result, government try as much as possible, particularly the present government try to provide social protection to give to the people. But when the resources meant for social protection goes to private pocket, then that's a classical case of human rights abuse of the people. And that denies the people opportunity for economic progress.
That's right.
David, nice to see you since 2013 when we were at Abuja with Professor Sylvester Odeon to lobby for the passage of the PIB bill. But from my own perspective, I need to check with you. When it comes to human rights, it doesn't have to be strictly based on Eurocentric definitions or using tools of Eurocentric-driven tools, to measure it. Based on the reports you are citing, I'm more interested in the issue of infant mortality. That are we really sure, or do we need to be advocating that the measurements being used currently, looking at just statistics from the hospitals, are also taking into account the experiences of our traditional medicine practitioners? Because quite a lot of children and a lot of women are actually being taken care of in the rural areas. And for me, I think human rights advocacy should be interested to ensure that all experiences are captured and not just the experiences of the hospitals. That is one. The second part of it is, isn't there the need to push as a solution to reduce infant mortality? Isn't there the need to push for a more comprehensive primary health care in the country?
I completely agree with you, sir. And this is where we are also advocating for more data on this issue, because the more you have data, the more you have evidence to do this analysis. And you agree with me that the issue of lack of data in Nigeria, particularly in the areas of maternal mortality and child mortality, is a huge, big issue. And in the issue you also raised about taking into consideration our traditional medicine, who are also doing fantastic job across the rural areas in the country. Data on them is difficult to assess, and therefore difficult for analysts like us or human rights activists from us to put an hand on what exactly the impact is. And so I completely agree with you to join in voicing for government to put more resources into data generation that will help analysts to beginning to appreciate the value that traditional medicines also bring to bear when we're talking about maternal mortality and we're talking about child mortality. But the question that has to also be put there is that we need evidence, but the evidence can only come with the political will. And that's where I see the need for us to begin to drive the conversation down to the value of primary health care. If you look across the country today, there's huge investment in the primary health care. But what has happened is that it is the leakages when it comes to money moving from the federal to the state and to the local government.
That's right.
Just recently in Bayelsa, we did a baseline survey across Bayelsa, where we went into the 8 local governments in Bayelsa, trying to establish what is the status of development in the primary health care center across the 8 local governments.
I'm afraid we're out of time.
Really mind-boggling.
Mr. David Ugolo, I'm afraid we have the time. This is a convenient place for us to actually leave this conversation. It's so much to talk about, but we just have to leave it here. Many thanks for joining us. Mr. David Ugolo is an Executive Director, African Network for Environment, Economic Justice. Thank you so much for your insights.